they're not even familiar with the intricacies of public housing. So when you look at this here, you think, what in the hell would they want to pull this down for and spend all that money? Structurally they're sound. That money could be easily used to build new units, right? Renovate these units. They haven't been touched in years. Now, I know someone who works as a public servant. The rent that's collected from all these estates goes into general revenue. It does not go into a budget earmarked for renovation. The government does what they like with this money. It's not stipulated what the rent money should be used for. Now, if you think if they were fair income about public housing, they would recognise that over a period of 20 years, 30 years, estates need to be renovated. They actually need to be maintained. Now, there's been a deliberate policy on this estate and on all the others. When someone moves out, they don't, and this has been going on for a while, they do not put someone else in. In fact, on this estate, it basically is, I would estimate, from the figures, their own figures of how many are on it, it's 600 below capacity of what it could house. It's 600 people below capacity. So this is the duplicity of the government in this whole role. Now, when you look at these estates, they are cultural and social entities. They actually have community centres. They have gardens. They have built into them support networks. They have local facilities available. Now, what is going on? What's going on is that all the 10 estates around the inner ring of Melbourne, they're looking at dollars. The government is complicit and criminal and colluding with the developers. This whole stage one here, I bet my bottom dollar, they've almost admitted it, will be all for private tenants. It would be sold freehold. It will never remain in public housing, even though they're saying, on the estates, they're saying there'll be 10% increase in housing, but they're not saying where on the estates. They're not saying which parts of the estates. They're not saying here, specifically, there will be public tenants coming back. They're just saying you'll be able to come back. They don't sign any agreement with any of the tenants. The only thing they get you to sign, the tenants, is to agree to move out. Now, any caring organisation would at least give people the peace of mind, right, of stipulating some long-term projection. People actually have medical problems. They actually have children who are in schools. They actually rely on local facilities because, like anyone in any suburb, they're intricately part of it. The neoconservative politicians of the Labor and the Liberal Party look at this and they see dollars. They don't see people. You've got to look at the strategy of the ALP government. It's been bloody cunning, all right? They've kept this under the radar really effectively. And it's only organisations like ours, the Defence of Public Housing Network, Friends of Public Housing, Defend Public Housing, been trying for a long time to basically put this on the radar to the citizens of Melbourne, basically, of what in the hell is going on here. You know, we still use the word public transport, but the government isn't using the word public housing anymore. Now, that's telling you something in itself. They're using this strange vocabulary of social housing. Now, what the bloody hell is social housing? Well, it's where they turn the housing over to private organisations with their own bureaucracy, so-called non-profit organisations that have their own criteria. And so when you look at the form that the tenants are being asked to sign, it says you will be able to come back if you meet the criteria of the community housing organisations. What are the criteria? What are the criteria of these community organisations? How many of them are there? There's up to 20. Now, This is a total movement away from the concept of public housing. I'll just ask Marceline to read the letter, and then if someone else wants to say something, we'll have...
Dear Minister Foley, we formally lodge this letter as a protest of the sham public housing renewal program across Melbourne. On many critical levels, there are numerous significant problems that impact on individuals, families, communities, and society at large. The highly emotionally charged issue of shelter, safety and stability is ignored by the policies and process your government has enacted. Tenants are simply not informed and consulted, and neither are issues raised by your program clarified. Clearly evident are the euphemisms used to present a diminishing number of flats for tenants with families, as the number of 3-bedroom flats are drastically reduced. The sheer dishonesty is clear, as families are aware that they will be pushed out. Ascot Vale, which is almost 73 acres and can house 2,300 tenants, is now only supporting 1,700. We recognise the deliberate refusal not to refill vacant flats. This is a complete blow to those 35,000 people or so on the waiting list and the homeless on our streets. The strategy to reduce and completely destroy public housing for vulnerable people on low incomes is despicable. Your government's policy, which heightens fear, anxiety and desperation amongst people on low incomes, is simply inhumane. We fundamentally object to a program that is based on the privatisation of public land. There is no place for private developers in public housing. We aim to make this an election issue and reveal the ALP for what it is.
Thank you everybody for coming, and let's make this a really noisy, lively march and tell Labor what we think of them. All public tenants know, I would ask every public tenant to imagine what their life would be like if it wasn't for public housing. Anybody's life can take a serious wrong turn, and you can find that you are absolutely in need of public housing. And we need public housing now more than ever, with so many people on the streets and 35,000 plus on the public housing waiting list. So, for heaven's sake, this is an absolute disgrace by all the governments that are not speaking up loud and clear to save public housing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Fiona. Fiona's from the Princess Hill Estate in Carlton there. No privatisation of public housing.
Slow down a little bit so you get the crowd.
No privatisation of public housing.
No privatisation of public housing.
No privatisation of public housing. No privatisation of public housing. No privatisation of public public housing here to stay. Greedy developers go away. Is the private development that the government proposed going to build any of this infrastructure? No, of course they're not. Okay, I'll just give it over to Steve now. He's a tenant off this estate. He's going to say a few words.
Hi, my name's Steve. I've been on the estate for about 22 years, right? We were concerned we only got one letter saying we have to move. Have to. My neighbour is Spanish, she's in her late 70s, I've got a Chinese neighbour. They asked the same question. I said, well, let's find out the answer. We're going down to the Ministry of Housing, 12 Churchill Avenue, where we're about to go. You know what they said? This is true. We don't know. So, what's the next step? We thought we'd go to the minister. We thought we'd go after the local MP many times. We're peaceful. We walked in there. 4 of us walked in there. Could we see the minister? No problem. I said, here's a letter we received from the Ministry of Housing, 12 Churchill Avenue. We've been asked to move soon. I got mine instead in January. He said, you know what he said? Don't know anything about it. No, you know what, before this I was a carer for 14 years, right? I look after the elderly, I was looking after 6 a day, right? They are concerned, they are scared. They're concerned, who's going to help them move? Where are they going to move? Very strong rumour going around, they're going to move to Denby Park and Holland Court and Racecourse Road. I don't know if you know the estate or not, they're up to 30 high, they've got a dozen security guards. You're going to change old people's lives. Everybody's scared in this world, right? The way things are happening. They haven't told us when we're going to move. We want to know when and where. 2 simple questions and they can't answer it. Why? Well, we're about to go up there now and ask them simple questions. When are we going to move? Where are we going to move? Who's going to help the old people move? Who's going to park the cartons? Help them with the luggage and whatever. It's going to be a change atmosphere for them. I really feel for them because, you know, when you get older, your life changes, right? I'm 62 next month, right? I'd like to know who's going to help the old people. But the main thing I want is answers for the people of these estates of Ascot Vale. When are we going to move so we can prepare ourselves? Where are we going to move? How long are we going to be gone for? Do you know? Please someone tell me. The Minister can't and the Housing Commission can't. What do we do? Thank you.
Why are people being pushed out of these housing estates? And it may very well be more than 9 housing estates that are going to be bulldozed, because they've got a separate list which includes the 3-storey walk-ups in between the high rises at Flemington and a couple of other places as well that are on the chopping block. But I think this is part of the overall privatisation agenda, because all of these public housing estates are public assets. And I don't actually think the motivation of the government is about public housing renewal at all. I think that's just been... I think that's the con job. Because I think people broadly in the community would be opposed to the selling off of all of this prime government-owned land, public land. This is our land, all of our land. People will be opposed to the government just flogging this off to developers if they just flogged it off. So they need a bit of a fig leaf to sell it to the public. And so that's why they're calling it public housing renewal. And that's why things are so tricky, all of these agreements, where they're saying one thing publicly, but when you look at the fine print of the agreements, there's no guarantee that people will get to come back. And I certainly know at the West Brunswick estate there's been a lot of bullying by housing department staff. People have been intensely bullied or sweet-talked, which is just another form of bullying, into signing relocation agreements, because the government is trying to clear out some of the estates, at least some of the estates, before this public housing inquiry reports, so that they can make it a done deal and they'll demoralise the remaining tenants. That's what they want to do. And if there is a significant minority of tenants who want to stay and refuse to sign those relocation agreements, then the government's got a political crisis and will force the debate into the public domain, because at the moment the media is not portraying the tenant side of the story. And even for people who are not public housing tenants, everyone needs housing. No one knows when they're going to be in a situation where they need public housing. And we know this money they're paying to the developers could be put into, you know, building more public housing. There's a desperate need for more public housing with the housing crisis at the moment. So I think every one of these little actions is important, because we come together, we meet people from different housing estates, and we can swap information, and we'll start to build a big campaign, because you don't get a big campaign overnight or lots of media coverage, or sometimes it might be the wrong media coverage where they try and do a job on people and try and discredit people. But I think every one of these little actions is important, because it's a building block to build a strong campaign. So we've got to try and resist signing those relocation letters. I understand last Friday the Housing Department admitted to Community Legal Centre lawyers that the relocation letters are misleading, and they're going to start to put out a new relocation letter. So this is all important information to know. And then the people they're trying to shuffle into private housing with rent subsidised, they're only guaranteeing 6 months rent subsidised. Now it leaves a lot of questions. Because we know there's a shortage of public housing. Where are they going to put people at the end of the 6 month subsidisation of rent? Like, there's a lot of questions and there's no guarantees despite Martin Foley's fridge magnets. So we've got to keep going with these actions.
Okay.
Thanks, Sue. To Councillor for the Northern Council. Save public housing.
Save public housing. Save public housing. Save public housing. Save public housing. Save public housing. Save public housing.
Public housing here to stay. Redevelopers go away. 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 Public housing here to stay. Redevelopers go away.
Public housing here to stay. Redevelopers stay away. Save public housing. Save public housing. Save public
We're
housing.
just going in to support our delegation to hand our letter of total and utter disgust and protest against Martin Foley, the Minister.
Yes. Yes,
Wrecking
disgrace.
ball policy.
Yes.
Okay, we're still waiting on a manager to accept our delegation and letter. There seems to be some prevarication.
You know what you do now? You see, why are we waiting? 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 Here, and they didn't know. Then we went to many times.
Is there any movement at the station in there?
No, they're just looking at the screen. We're looking at
Just looking through the two-way glass.
one-way mirror, and we can't see the people behind them.
All right, well, we'll see our reflection. We'll leave it as a few through delegation, but we'll just go out and see if they come out if we just reduce our numbers.
Receptionist staff, people laugh like that when they're nervous.
We'll leave the delegation here and we'll come out.
I mean, it's bad publicity for them, but it's not because necessarily.
Well, folks, that basically says it all. Sorry. The manager is unwilling to accept the letter.